Welcome to Fierce Queen's Reckoning. Before we begin, let's step into tonight's story. Her husband's girlfriend was wearing Nora's cashmere coat, the charcoal one with the tortoise-shell buttons that Nora had bought herself for her 40th birthday, and standing in the doorway of Nora's own kitchen, pointing at the front door with the calm authority of someone who had already decided the outcome of an argument that hadn't yet started. "I think it's time for you to go," Kelsey said. Nora Calloway looked at the woman. She was maybe 26. She had the particular kind of confidence that belongs exclusively to people who have never been truly humiliated. Nora recognized it, because she had once possessed it herself, before 14 years of marriage to Garrett Calloway had systematically sanded it away. Garrett was standing at the kitchen island, his back half turned, pouring himself a glass of the Pinot Noir that Nora's mother had brought from the Okanagan last Thanksgiving. He didn't look up. "She's right," he said. "This is getting embarrassing." Nora had come home from her sister's place in Barrie 3 days early. She had not planned to, but her sister Fiona had looked at her across the dinner table on Sunday evening and said quietly and without drama, "You know, don't you?" And Nora had understood, with the particular exhaustion of a woman who has known something for a long time, but only just allowed herself to know it, that yes, she did. She had driven the 2 hours back to their house in Oakville in the dark, on the 400, and then the QEW, the lake on her left, like a strip of black foil in the November cold. She had told herself she just needed to look him in the eye. She had told herself she only wanted the truth. She had not anticipated finding Kelsey Marsh in her kitchen at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, wearing her coat. "Garrett," Nora said. Her voice was level. She was proud of how level it was. "I need you to ask her to leave." "She's not leaving." Garrett finally turned around. He had the easy, unhurried look of a man who was not afraid of consequences, because he had never suffered any. "You are? I've been trying to tell you for months this isn't working. You just refuse to hear it. This is my house." "Our house," he corrected, and the way he said it, the slight emphasis, the little smile, made her understand that he had been practicing that correction, that he had been looking forward to saying it. What happened next happened quickly. Nora pulled her phone out of her jacket pocket and opened the camera. She told him, calmly, that she was documenting the presence of a third party in the matrimonial home. Garrett's face shifted. He walked toward her. He didn't hit her. Garrett was the kind of man who understood optics far too well to leave a mark, but he took her by the upper arm and walked her backward toward the front door, with the inexorable, practiced efficiency of someone who had rehearsed this too. He opened the door. The November air came in like a blade. "Sleep in the car," he said, "or drive back to Fiona's. I don't care. But you're done making scenes in this house." The door closed. The deadbolt turned. Nora stood on the front step in her jacket and her boots, her phone still in her hand, and looked at the closed door for a long moment. A light freezing rain was just beginning, the kind that doesn't make a sound, that simply settles on everything and makes the world quietly treacherous. The porch light was off. Down the street, the neighbors' houses glowed with the comfortable certainty of families who were, at this particular moment, indoors. She did not knock. She did not shout. She walked to her car, a gray Volvo wagon, sensible and forgettable, and got in and shut the door and sat in the dark with the engine off, letting the cold come in slowly while she thought. 14 years. She had met Garrett Calloway at a firm event in Toronto. She was 30, newly made senior associate, wearing a dress she'd bought specifically because it didn't look expensive. He was charming in the particular way of men who have been told all their lives that they are exceptional. A little too ready with the laugh, a little too comfortable with the room. She had found it attractive then. She had read it as confidence. It took her years to understand that what she had mistaken for confidence was simply the absence of self-doubt, and that those two things are not the same at all. She had left the firm when they married. Garrett had not asked her to, not directly. It had been accomplished through a long series of small suggestions, gentle observations about the difficulty of managing both things, and one specific conversation. She remembered it precisely. A Saturday morning in their first apartment in the annex, coffee cups on the windowsill, where he had said, "I just want you to have space to figure out what you actually want." And she had believed that he meant it. What she had wanted, it turned out, was to run the investment operations of her family's holding company. But that was a fact she had not shared with Garrett, not because she was ashamed of it, but because she had spent most of her adult life learning to be careful about who she told. Nora's family name was not Calloway. That was Garrett's. Her family name was Beaumont Ford. Her grandfather, Claude Beaumont Ford, had built a modest construction supply company in Sudbury in the 1960s. Her father, Thomas, had turned it into something considerably less modest. Beaumont Ford Capital now held a controlling interest in a constellation of commercial real estate, private infrastructure, and renewable energy assets across Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia, with minority stakes in three mid-sized American logistics firms. The family was not famous. They were specifically, deliberately, historically unfamous. Thomas Beaumont Ford had a pathological aversion to the word billionaire appearing in print near his name, and he had the legal team to make that aversion stick. When Nora was 24, she had gone to her father and asked permission to disappear, not literally, but to live outside the Beaumont Ford envelope for a while, to meet people who didn't know, to find out who she was when she wasn't somebody's heir. Thomas had agreed with conditions. She would maintain a Beaumont Ford's identity document under her own name. She would carry a specific phone. She would accept a quiet, invisible security arrangement that she would never have to think about unless she needed it. She had not needed it. Until now. She picked up the ordinary phone, the one Garrett knew about, and set it on the passenger seat. Then she reached under the driver's seat and removed a flat black case the size of a paperback novel. Inside was a second phone. It ran on a private network. It had one contact in it. His name was Wallace Tran. Wallace was not the kind of person who appeared on a firm's website. He was the kind of person who called you back within 3 minutes, at any hour, in any time zone. Because that was what he was retained to do. He had spent 12 years as a forensic intelligence analyst at a firm that did work for the federal government, and, for certain private clients, whose names did not appear in the firm's materials, and for the past 7 years, he had worked exclusively for the Beaumont Ford family, in a capacity that was described internally as risk management, and which actually meant that if you threatened a member of this family, Wallace Tran would know everything about you within 6 hours, and you would not enjoy what happened next. Nora had not spoken to Wallace in 4 years. The phone rang once. Nora. His voice was unhurried, the way very competent people are unhurried. Your GPS has you outside the Oakville property. Are you all right? I'm in my car, she said. Garrett locked me out. There was a pause. Not hesitation. Assessment. Is there physical contact I should know about? He grabbed my arm and walked me to the door. No marks. Understood. She could hear him moving. I'm looking at your location now. A security unit can be at your position in 18 minutes. Not yet, she said. I need you to do something else first. She'd been thinking. In the 10 minutes, she'd sat in the dark car. With the clarity that sometimes arrives when a thing you have dreaded for a long time finally arrives and turns out to be survivable. She'd been thinking about what she actually knew, and what she wanted done about it, and in what order. She told Wallace about the wire transfer she had found 2 weeks ago, while reviewing the joint account statements. $180,000, moved in 3 tranches to a numbered company she didn't recognize. She told him about the property in Collingwood she had found paperwork for, a chalet registered in a name she didn't know, purchased with money that appeared to have originated from a shell they held jointly for what Garrett had described as an investment vehicle. She told him about Kelsey Marsh, who was a client relationship manager at Garrett's firm, which was called Pinnacle Wealth Partners, which managed approximately $340 million in assets for clients who trusted Garrett Calloway because he was very good at seeming trustworthy. How long has Pinnacle been one of ours? She asked. Wallace's typing was quiet and fast. We acquired a 38% stake through the Lakeview Capital vehicle 14 months ago, which means technically he reports to a board that reports to a structure that your father controls. Good, she said. I want him fired tonight. For cause. I want it to come from the board, properly documented, citing the wire transfer as prima facie evidence of client fund diversion. I want the OSC notified. The Ontario Securities Commission. And I want both the personal and corporate accounts frozen pending the investigation. That's a significant escalation. He put his hands on me and locked me out of my house in the freezing rain, Wallace, while his girlfriend wore my coat. Another pause. The coat is a nice detail, he said, and she could hear that he was not entirely without feeling. What about the Collingwood property? That too, whatever legal mechanism exists to encumber it. He's not selling that chalet. She paused. And the house? The Oakville house? Yes, she exhaled. I need you to explain something to Garrett that he apparently doesn't know, which is that the mortgage on that property is held by a company called Lorne Ridge Holdings. and that Lorne Ridge Holdings is a Beaumont Ford vehicle, and that the deed, therefore, has never actually transferred to him. Wallace finished. He's been paying into a trust account. For 9 years, she said. When she and Garrett had bought the house, his financing had fallen through 10 days before closing. His credit was overextended. She had not known by how much until later, and the bank had withdrawn conditionally. Nora had not told him she fixed it. She had simply had Lorne Ridge Holdings step into the mortgage position, and had instructed her family's administrative office to generate statements on letterhead that looked like a conventional lender. And Garrett had spent 9 years believing he was building equity in a property that had, at all times, been financed by his wife's family. She had done it to protect his pride. She understood now that pride, in Garrett Calloway's case, was not something that required her protection. Initiate the eviction process, she said. Whatever the proper notice period is in Ontario, serve it tonight. I want the paperwork in his hands. There will need to be a proper legal filing. Emergency applications can be made, but we have a lawyer who does nothing but exactly this, she said. Call her. Already dialing. Wallace said. Nora, there's one more thing. What? Mrs. Marsh. Her accounts at the firm. She has a managed portfolio with Pinnacle. Given that the funds Garrett diverted may have been used in part for her benefit, the Collingwood property has her name on it as co-registrant. She can be named in the OSC referral. Nora looked through the rain-misted windshield at the house. From here she could see the warm rectangle of the kitchen window. A shadow moved across it. Kelsey, probably, helping herself to more wine. Do it, she said. And Wallace, the utilities on the house. Is there anything we can do there? Smart home system, he said. It's registered through a telecommunications provider that happens to be, a brief pause, a subsidiary of an infrastructure fund in which Beaumont Ford holds majority interest. I can reach the right person. Turn everything off, she said. Heat, water, internet, all of it. Give me 12 minutes. She set the phone on the dash and sat back. Outside, the freezing rain continued its quiet, indifferent work. The street was empty. The neighbors' houses glowed. She turned the Volvo's heat up and waited. She counted slowly in her head. The kitchen window went dark first, then the upstairs hallway light. Then, in a single definitive blink, every light in the house went out simultaneously, and the property became a dark shape against the slightly less dark sky. She heard faintly from inside a shout. She could not make out the words. She didn't need to. Inside the house, Garrett Calloway stood in the kitchen with his phone's flashlight, cutting a pale beam through the absolute dark, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The power had gone. The backup didn't kick in. He went to check the panel and found every breaker exactly where it should be. He tried to call the utility company and found he had no signal. He looked out the front window and saw that every other house on the street was fully lit. The neighbors across the road watching television, their porch light on, their world entirely uninterrupted. Only his house was dark. Only his house was dead. Kelsey was frightened, though she was working hard not to show it. She kept asking questions he didn't have answers to. He told her it was a local issue, a grid problem. It would sort itself. He went to the back of the house and tried the generator. The panel was dark. The manual start did nothing. He pressed the override. Nothing. The house was already getting cold. He went to the kitchen tap and turned it. A hiss of air, a few drops. Nothing. He tried the bathroom. Nothing. He sat on the kitchen counter in the dark, his phone flashlight on, and ran through the logic of it, the way he always ran through the logic of things. Systematically, with the working assumption that he was the smartest person in the room. A simultaneous failure of the power, the generator, the water, and the cellular network, while every house on the street continued to function normally. It wasn't a grid problem. He thought about the wire transfer. He thought about the numbered company. He thought, against his will, about the mortgage. He had always known, in some back corner of his mind, that the mortgage had been arranged strangely. The lender, Lorne Ridge Holdings, had never caused him any trouble. The statements came regularly. The interest rate was reasonable. The whole thing had been presented to him, at closing, as a conventional arrangement, and he had not looked closely, because at the time he had been grateful, and grateful men don't always ask the questions they should. He found the flashlight and went to his study. He pulled out the mortgage documents. He looked at the lender name. He opened his laptop. The battery still had charge, and searched Lorne Ridge Holdings. The results were minimal. A registered company in Ontario. No website, no news, no individuals named. He searched the parent company. Then the parent of the parent. The ownership structure was nested and deliberate, the kind of architecture that doesn't happen by accident. He didn't find the Beaumont Ford name, but he found a reference in a 7-year-old Globe and Mail piece about a Muskoka land acquisition to the Lakeview Capital vehicle. And he found, in a footnote of a regulatory filing, that Lakeview Capital had been flagged in the same sentence as a holding entity associated with private interests in Ontario. He closed the laptop. He sat in the dark and thought about the woman sitting in the Volvo at the end of his driveway. He had spent 14 years believing that Nora was lucky to have him. He had believed it so completely, for so long, that the belief had calcified into something indistinguishable from fact. She was quiet. She was careful with money. She drove a gray Volvo wagon and asked for nothing extravagant, and worked from home on consulting projects she was vague about. He had never pushed her on the consulting. He had assumed it was modest. He had assumed everything about her was modest. He thought about the phone she had taken out when he was walking her to the door. Not the phone he knew about. A different one, flat and dark, barely visible, but she had tucked it into her jacket in a specific way, the way people tuck things they don't want you to notice. He stood up. At 2 a.m., the corporate phone he kept in the desk drawer, the one that ran on the firm's private satellite connection, buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line was in red. He opened it. His hands went cold before he finished the first paragraph. Effective immediately. Termination for cause. Evidence of material breach of fiduciary duty. Client fund diversion. Referral to the Ontario Securities Commission. All access revoked. Do not attempt to contact clients or colleagues. He read it 3 times. Then he went to his bank. Account suspended. Then his investment account. Frozen. Pending investigation. Then the Cayman vehicle he had never told anyone about. He logged in through the secondary device, through 3 authentication layers, and stared at a balance of 0 and a single line of text that had no business being there, injected directly into the private dashboard. The ledger has always been mine to read, Garrett. WT. He did not know who WT was, but his hands were shaking. Not from the cold, though the house was very cold now, the radiators silent, the floor tiles like standing water against his bare feet. Kelsey came into the study, wrapped in the throw blanket from the living room. She was holding her phone, which had somehow acquired a brief signal, a bar of something that appeared and vanished. She had received 2 messages in that moment, one from Pinnacle HR, one from her bank. She looked up from the screen. Her face, in the flashlight's glow, had lost the composure she'd walked into the kitchen with 6 hours ago. "Garrett," she said, "I've been terminated. I know. My accounts are frozen. The OSC?" She stopped. "The OSC is involved. Garrett, they're saying I received diverted client funds. They're saying the Collingwood property." Her voice cracked. "You said that was a gift. You said it was yours to give." "It's a misunderstanding," he said, which was what he always said. And she looked at him with an expression that told him she was 26, and perhaps not as inexperienced with liars as he had assumed. "You put my name on a property you bought with stolen money," she said. "I'm going to be investigated by a securities regulator. I could lose my license." She was crying now, though her voice was still tight, controlled. "You told me she didn't care. You told me she had no fight in her." He had told her that. He had believed it. Outside on the street, 2 dark SUVs arrived with their headlights off. They pulled to the curb with the practiced quiet of people who do not need to announce themselves. Garrett saw them through the bay window, saw the doors open, saw the people who stepped out moving, with a coordinated, unhurried purpose that immediately distinguished them from anything resembling ordinary security. They fanned across the lawn. They reached the front. The knock, 3 beats, heavy, deliberate, echoed through the cold and silent house. Then a voice, amplified but calm, carrying the particular register of someone who is not making a request. "Garrett Calloway, this property is held by Lorne Ridge Holdings, a registered Beaumont Ford asset. You are an unlawful occupancy of a property to which you hold no legal title. Open the door voluntarily, or we will proceed with the court-authorized entry. You have 30 seconds. Garrett did not move. "You cannot do this," he said to no one, to the room, to the principal of it. "I have rights. This is my house." He called 911 from the satellite phone. It connected. He told the dispatcher his address, told her there were people on his lawn, told her he needed police immediately. The dispatcher's voice was professional and regretful. A court order had been filed, she told him, at 12:47 a.m., by a registered legal firm on behalf of the property holder. Local law enforcement had been notified and had confirmed the order was valid. She advised him to cooperate with the property representative. The property representative, he repeated. The call ended. The door came open with a sound he would not forget, a clean mechanical application of force, precise and without anger. The frame giving way not explosively, but with a kind of resigned efficiency. 4 flashlight beams swept the foyer. A man stepped forward. He was perhaps 50, wearing a technical jacket, an earpiece. His expression was that of someone for whom this was an ordinary Tuesday. Mr. Calloway. He held out a waterproof envelope. You're being formally served. Eviction notice executed under court authority. Civil suit from Pinnacle Wealth Partners Parent Board for the recovery of diverted funds. And a restraining order filed by Nora Ford. Garrett stared at the name on the documents. Ford. He had looked that name up once, early in their relationship, in a vague, disinterested way, and had found nothing connected to Nora. Because she had made sure there was nothing to find. Because she had been careful in a way he had never been. Because he had never needed to be. You have 5 minutes to gather personal clothing, the man said. Anything purchased with joint account funds stays. Your vehicle is currently being recovered. It was leased through a Pinnacle corporate account, which has been closed. Where am I supposed to go? Garrett said. The man looked at him with a particular expression of someone who has heard this question before and has no good answer for it. That's outside our instructions, sir. Kelsey was already moving toward the door, the blanket around her shoulders, her face set with the concentrated blankness of someone trying to hold themselves together. She turned at the threshold and looked at Garrett with eyes that had shed the last of the warmth that had, 6 hours ago, been pointed at Nora through the glass. Don't follow me, she said simply. And she walked out into the rain. Garrett stood in the ruined foyer with his 5 minutes and his one bag, and looked at the water-stained envelope on the floor. Outside, at the end of the driveway, Nora's gray Volvo sat with the engine running. She had the heat on. She had a travel mug of tea. She'd had a thermos in the back seat, left over from the drive up from Barry, still warm enough. She was watching the house with the quiet attention of someone who has already made all her decisions and is simply waiting for the physical world to catch up. She saw the lights of the SUVs. She saw the shadow of the door giving way. She saw, after a while, 2 figures emerge from the front of the house and stand on the porch in the rain. Garrett walked toward her car. He would. Of course he would. She had always been, in his mind, the last available resource, the fallback, the soft place he could return to when everything else fell through. He walked up to the passenger window. She lowered it 2 inches. His face, in the ambient light of the street lamp, was doing several things at once, working through shock, working through calculation, working towards something that was trying to be contrition, but kept sliding back into negotiation. She recognized the pattern. She had watched it operate for 14 years. Nora, he said, I need you to tell me what's happening. You locked me out of my house, she said, in the freezing rain, in November. And you stood there and watched. I know. I wasn't thinking clearly. We can talk about this. We can. He stopped, regrouped. You have to know I didn't understand the mortgage situation. If I'd known. You knew enough, she said. You knew the money for that chalet didn't come from anywhere clean. You knew what you were doing with the client accounts. You didn't need to know the whole picture. Let me in the car, he said. It's 4 degrees out here. We can. You told me the cold helps people get clear, she said. That's what you said when you put me out there. I think it's probably true. She looked at him for a moment. Just looked. The way you look at something you're finished looking at. It was 14 years, Garrett. I cooked your dinners and managed your calendar, and sat through your partner's dinners, and listened to your colleagues. Talked to me like I was decorative. I tried to make it work. I really did. She pressed the button, and the window rolled up. She did not look at his face. She put the car in drive. She pulled slowly away from the curb, the Volvo quiet and steady on the wet street, the red tail lights making long reflections on the slick asphalt. In the mirror, she could see him standing in the rain. She did not watch him for long. She had an appointment with Wallace in the morning to review the full scope of the asset recovery, and her lawyer had already filed the divorce petition, and her sister Fiona had left 3 messages asking her to call when she was safe. She pressed the Bluetooth button on the steering wheel. Call Fiona, she said. The phone rang twice. I know, Nora said when her sister picked up. I'm safe. I'm on my way. She turned onto the lake shore, the dark expanse of Lake Ontario opening up to her left. Its surface invisible in the November night but present, enormous, indifferent, in the way that large, permanent things are indifferent, unmoved by what had just happened on a quiet street in Oakville. entirely unconcerned with who had, until tonight, believed himself to be in charge of anything at all.